One of the core fundamentals in the development of the game I've been working on has been to make something fresh and original, instead of borrowing the well-explored gameplay loops of other genres and simply sticking some kind of minor gimmick on top. While the advantage of this was that the game would stand out a lot more, the obvious disadvantage is that designing something on the more original side of things was going to be an uphill battle, considering that you will have few, if any, references to work with. So, how did the process of designing this game's gameplay loop go? The fundamental idea that spawned the creation of this game was the idea of a kart racer that's also a fighting game, which then slowly morphed into a vision of a sort of nuclear-thrown kart racer. A bit of a far cry of what the game is nowadays, but it's not like the influence of the latter can't be seen. With that as the core vision, I went to work and started sketching out some ideas. The idea of the gameplay loop was pretty simple. You drive along a randomly generated track which has enemies appear as you progress. These can be taken out with various attacks. On top of that, you could also boost to go faster and break the boundaries of the track by using some health, which can then be refilled by destroying enemies. At last, the track would also be populated by non-aggressive vehicles that you could use for some extra HP regain. So, sounds pretty simple. The allure is the boosting mechanic, which makes for a solid push and pull and encourages interaction with enemies. A fun mix of some sort of racing game combined with a beat 'em up. Unfortunately, when implemented as a prototype, this idea had immediate flaws. In the first implementation, the non-aggressive vehicles that would appear along the track would refill so much HP that you had no need to actually interact with the enemies. You could just keep boosting, only destroying the harmless cars, never having to face any real danger. Okay then, just reduce the amount of HP they give. Easy. Well, now you've got the problem that you're kinda forced to stop boosting, as you run out of HP to do so, which really breaks the flow of the game. You now have to actively wait for the enemies after creating such a huge gap, which ended up being pretty boring and kinda awkward from a gameplay perspective. And you might think, well, that's another easy fix, just make the enemies faster. And so I did, but with this change, the game has now become too punishing for inexperienced players. These players were already boost averse, so with the vehicles tuned to challenge boosting speed, they no longer had any chance the moment they made one mistake. So at this point, you might think of a fairly popular mechanic in racing games, which is rubber banding. Simply adjusting the speed of enemies based on their relative position to the player, making them faster if they're far behind and slower if they're far ahead. And this is definitely a solution, but I wouldn't consider it a good one. Because at that point, why even boost in the first place? The entire aspect of using boost as a movement mechanic to create space from enemies has been lost with such an addition. Fixing this gameplay loop seems pretty dire so far. How do we allow experienced players to keep up their flow and push the game as much as possible, meaning boosting a ton? Still have said experienced players interact a lot with enemies, as otherwise a lot of the push and pull would be lost? Create a gameplay loop that supports a diverse set of playstyles, whether that be insanely risky or pretty safe, but also let new players take their time to learn the game. This is where the introduction of a new mechanic comes into place that solves these issues: taunting. A mechanic that, on the push of a button, simply speeds up all the enemy vehicles behind you. This ended up being a fairly good solution. New players, which are really risk-averse and still figuring out the control and flow of the game, could simply ignore this mechanic entirely, while they were still learning. In fact, in the newest version of the game's demo, which you can find on Steam, this mechanic is only introduced later in the second part of the tutorial. Experienced players, on the other hand, can use this mechanic to speed up the enemy vehicles to their boost speed, letting them continue to boost as they regain HP, rather than having to stop boosting, breaking the flow. And on top of that, boosting can still be used as a way to make space between you and the enemies. If you want to close that space quickly to get an opportunity to gain HP, it's entirely up to you, which introduces a lot of interesting decision making for the player. With this, the core gameplay loop was born. Spend HP to boost, destroy vehicles along the track, then taunt to speed up enemies behind you to quickly get your HP back. This then lets you boost again, repeating the cycle. Equip this set of mechanics with a rank system similar to the ones you see in character action games, a timer and a score mechanic, and you end up with a game that has a very high skill ceiling and a lot of rapid decisions to make. There's a lot of other stuff that I've put on top of this to make the game a bit more interesting, but these systems make up the core of the gameplay loop, which I think works pretty well as of right now. I'll try to talk about these additional systems and the mechanics in future videos. If what you heard sounds interesting to you, make sure to check out the game's demo on Steam, link in the description. If you have any feedback after playing, please let me know. Thanks for listening, and until next time.